The setting sun cast long shadows across the barren landscape of Axion, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet that seemed almost too vivid to be natural. Captain Rex Thorne stood at the observation deck of the Earth Colony outpost, his weathered face stoic as he surveyed the alien terrain. After 15 years of military service across 3 different planetary conflicts, very little surprised him anymore. The tension between human settlers and the native Axionites was just another chapter in humanity's complicated expansion into the stars. Captain Thorne, a soft voice with a distinct melodic accent, interrupted his thoughts. Rex turned to find a young Axionite female standing behind him. She couldn't have been more than 19 by Earth years, though aging equivalencies between species were never exact. Her skin had the characteristic pale blue tint of her people, with faint luminescent markings that seemed to pulse slightly in the dimming light. But what truly set her apart was her hair, a brilliant orange cascade that seemed to float slightly, defying gravity in a way unique to Axionite physiology. "This is a restricted area," he said firmly, though not unkindly. "Civilians aren't permitted on the military deck after sunset." The girl blinked her large, iridescent eyes, another Axionite trait that humans found both beautiful and slightly unsettling. "I'm Ionra Raylan. I've been granted special clearance by Commander Jacobs." She produced an authorization chip with nervous fingers. "I'm part of the cultural exchange program." Rex verified the credentials with a quick scan. They were legitimate. "The exchange program doesn't typically include tours of military installations," he noted dryly. "I specifically requested to meet you," she admitted, a deeper blue flush spreading across her cheeks in what Rex recognized as their equivalent of a blush. "I've heard stories about the Battle of Centauri Prime, how you negotiated peace when everyone else was ready for war." Rex's jaw tightened. He didn't like being reminded of Centauri. Too many had died before that peace was reached. "You shouldn't believe everything you hear, Miss Raylan." "Ionra," she corrected him gently. "And I don't just believe stories. I study facts. Your tactical approach to conflict resolution has been included in our diplomatic training modules." That caught Rex off guard. He studied the young woman more carefully now. There was an intensity to her gaze that belied her youthful appearance. "You're in diplomatic training? Aren't you a bit young?" Ionra straightened her slender frame. "I'm 22 by your Earth calendar. Young for a diplomat, perhaps, but I'm considered gifted by my people." Rex felt a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, despite himself. There was something refreshing about her earnestness, a welcome contrast to the hardened military personnel and suspicious politicians he dealt with daily. "What exactly can I help you with, Ionra?" She took a step closer, the scent of something like jasmine, but with an alien undertone filling the air between them. "I want to understand how you think, how you see us, the Axionites. Your perspective is unique among human leadership. My perspective is simply practical. War is costly. Peace, while challenging, is always preferable. Is that all?" Her head tilted slightly, those luminous eyes studying him with unexpected perception. "No moral considerations?" "No. Emotional involvement." Rex turned back to the view of the alien landscape, suddenly uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "Emotions complicate military decisions. But isn't it emotion, empathy specifically, that allowed you to connect with the Centaurian elders when other humans could not?" He remained silent, unwilling to admit she had touched on something true. After a moment, he felt a light touch on his arm. Her hand was there, 5 slender fingers not unlike a human's, but with a slight iridescent quality to the skin. "I admire you, Captain Thorne," she said softly. "I believe I could learn much from you." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable, but there was something else there too, an undercurrent that made Rex take a step back. He'd seen enough to recognize attraction, regardless of the species. "Miss Rowling." "Ionra," she corrected again, more softly this time. "Ionra," he conceded. "I think you may have misinterpreted my role here. I'm a military advisor, not a diplomatic trainer." "I understand what you are," she replied, and the certainty in her voice made something in his chest tighten unexpectedly. "Better perhaps than you realize." The way she looked at him, openly admiring, oddly knowing, made Rex suddenly aware of their age difference, of the power dynamics at play, of a dozen regulations that existed precisely to prevent complicated entanglements between humans and the indigenous populations of colonized worlds. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said, his voice regaining its professional edge. Disappointment flashed across her features, but she nodded with dignity. As she turned to go, however, she paused. "May I ask one more question, Captain?" He nodded curtly. "If circumstances were different, if I were older, perhaps, or if we had met in another context, would you have been willing to teach me what you know?" The question disarmed him with its directness. Rex found himself responding with unexpected honesty. "Perhaps. Come back when you're older, and we'll see." The words were meant to be dismissive, a gentle way to end an awkward encounter. He never imagined she would take them as a promise. Ionra smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her alien features into something strangely beautiful. "I will," she said simply. "Remember that, Captain Thorne. I will come back." She left him standing on the observation deck, wondering why those parting words felt less like a goodbye and more like a prophecy. 5 years passed like the blink of an eye in military time. For Rex Thorne, now promoted to Major, they had been filled with advisory positions across 3 star systems, 2 minor conflicts, and countless diplomatic missions. When orders came to return to Axion, he accepted them with the same stoic efficiency he applied to all assignments, though privately he wondered what he would find on a world he had last seen teetering on the edge of rebellion. The transport ship descended through Axion's atmosphere, and Rex gazed out at the changed landscape. The human settlement had expanded considerably, urban structures now sprawling across what had once been open plains. Yet he also noted the increased integration of Axionite architectural elements, curved, organic shapes that complemented rather than dominated the natural environment. "Impressive, isn't it?" said General Harris, who had accompanied him from Earth Command. 5 years ago, we were looking at a potential planet-wide insurgency. Now with a model for human-indigenous cooperation. What changed? Rex asked, genuinely curious. His briefings had been surprisingly vague on specifics. "Many factors," Harris replied diplomatically. "But much credit goes to the new coalition government, and particularly their young ambassador. She's the reason you're here, actually." Before Rex could ask for clarification, the ship docked with a gentle shudder. As they disembarked, Rex was greeted by a military honor guard, standard protocol for his rank, but behind them stood a delegation of Axionites in formal attire. And at their center, a woman whose identity hid him with instant recognition despite the years that had passed. Ionra Raylan had indeed grown older, though the change was more profound than mere physical maturity. Gone was the nervous young student. In her place stood a poised diplomat, her orange hair elaborately styled with ceremonial silver ornaments that accentuated her elongated features. Her traditional Axionite robes were complemented with subtle elements of human fashion, a diplomatic statement in itself. "Major Thorne," she greeted him with a formal bow. "Welcome back to Axion. We're honored by your return." Rex managed to maintain his professional demeanor despite his surprise. "Ambassador Raylan, I presume? The honor is mine." A flicker of amusement crossed her features. "You remember me. I'm flattered." "You made an impression," he replied neutrally, though internally he was reassessing everything about this assignment. No one had mentioned she would be his primary contact. The formal welcomes and introductions continued, but throughout it all, Rex found his attention repeatedly drawn back to Ionra. There was something unmistakably different about her. Not just the physical maturity or the confident diplomacy, but something deeper, more intangible. A gravity to her presence that hadn't existed before. Later, in the privacy of the diplomatic compound's garden, Ionra finally addressed what had been unspoken through the day's formalities. "I told you I would come back," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she poured a ceremonial Axionite tea into 2 cups. "Though technically, you're the one who returned." Rex accepted the offered drink, noticing the slight tremor in her hand that belied her otherwise composed exterior. "I had no idea you'd become the planetary ambassador." That's quite an achievement for someone your age. 27 isn't so young by human standards, she countered. And our species matures somewhat differently than yours. Clearly, he acknowledged, your diplomatic skills are impressive. Everyone I've spoken with credits you with preventing a war. Ayanra's expression grew more serious. We came closer than most realize. There are elements on both sides who would still prefer conflict over cooperation, which is why I've been sent back. She nodded. Earth Command is concerned about increasing draconian influence in our sector. The intelligence suggests they may be attempting to destabilize Axion as a strategic move against Earth's expansion. Rex frowned. The Draconians were a militant species whose encounters with humanity had been universally hostile. Do you have evidence of direct interference? Ayanra glanced around, then lowered her voice. This is where matters become complicated. Major Thorn, what I'm about to share isn't widely known, even among your military leadership. She reached into her robe and produced a small holographic projector. The image that appeared between them showed Ayanra in different clothing, a utilitarian uniform that Rex immediately recognized as belonging to the Galactic Security Force, an independent peacekeeping organization. Your GSF, he stated flatly. Special Intelligence Division, she confirmed. I've been tracking Draconian operations for the past 3 years. My diplomatic position provides the perfect cover. Rex absorbed this revelation with mixed emotions. It explained her remarkable rise to prominence, but also raised countless questions about her true agenda and about why he specifically had been recalled to Axion. Why tell me this? Sharing your cover identity violates at least a dozen GSF protocols. Ayanra deactivated the projector, her expression unreadable. Because I need your help, and I won't get it through deception. We've identified a Draconian operative embedded within the Axionite Liberation Front, a radical group opposed to human presence on our world. Drex Vaughn, Rex said, the name like acid on his tongue. Ayanra's eyes widened slightly. You know him. We have history, Rex replied grimly. Centauri Prime. He orchestrated the massacre at New Haven Colony before disappearing. Over 3,000 civilians dead. Understanding dawned in Ayanra's eyes. That explains why you were specifically requested for this mission. Your experience with Vaughn makes you invaluable. Requested by whom? Rex asked, though he already suspected the answer. By me, she admitted. I've been following your career, Rex. Your approaches to conflict resolution, your tactical thinking, and yes, your history with Vaughn. I needed someone I could trust, someone with the right experience, and someone who... She hesitated. Someone who what? Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he glimpsed the young woman from 5 years ago beneath the polished diplomat. Someone who might be willing to help me for reasons beyond just duty. The implication hung in the air between them. Rex felt a complex mixture of emotions. Professional concern over her admission, surprise at her continued interest after all this time, and beneath it all, an unexpected sense of connection that he'd rarely experienced in his career. What exactly are you proposing? He asked carefully. I need to infiltrate the Alf's inner circle. They're planning something significant, something Vaughn is orchestrating from the shadows. But they're suspicious of anyone with government connections. And how do I factor into this plan? Ayanra took a deep breath. They know you by reputation. The human officer who respects Axionite culture and questions his own government's policies. If you were to appear, disillusioned with your assignment, sympathetic to the Alf's legitimate grievances, you want me to pose as a potential defector, Rex concluded. A human insider who could provide valuable military intelligence. Yes, and she hesitated again, then continued with renewed determination. And as my romantic partner, Rex nearly choked on his tea. Excuse me. Interspecies relationships are rare, but not unheard of. Ayanra explained, her professional tone belied by the deepening blue flush on her cheeks. A human officer involved with an Axionite diplomat would have divided loyalties by definition. It would explain your willingness to share information, while simultaneously giving me a reason to bring you into circles I frequent. Rex set down his cup, studying her carefully. This is an elaborate cover story. Are you certain it's necessary? The ALF has sophisticated security protocols, including empathic sensors that can detect deception. A half-truth is easier to maintain than a complete fabrication. If there's genuine, emotional resonance between us, it provides authenticity that can't be easily faked. The tactical part of Rex's mind acknowledged the logic of her plan, even as warning bells sounded about the potential complications. And what does your GSF handler think of this approach? I am my own handler on this mission, she replied. The decision is mine, as is the risk. Rex stood and walked to the edge of the garden, looking out at the Axionite capital city spread below them. The setting sun cast the same amber glow he remembered from years ago, but everything else had changed, especially the woman behind him. You've gone to extraordinary lengths to bring me here, he said finally. Why not simply request a joint GSF Earth Command operation? Why the elaborate personal connection? He heard her soft footsteps as she approached, stopping just behind him. Because this isn't just about the mission for me, Rex, she said quietly. It never has been. He turned to face her, finding her much closer than he expected. The years had indeed changed her, adding definition to her features and a depth to her eyes that spoke of experiences both challenging and transformative. 5 years ago, you told me to come back when I was older, she continued. I've done more than that. I've become someone who can stand as your equal, professionally and personally. I've earned my position through merit and sacrifice. I never doubted your abilities, Rex replied. Even then, but you saw me as a child, a student. Her gaze held his without wavering. Is that still all you see? The question demanded honesty, and Rex found himself unwilling to offer anything less. No, he admitted, that's not what I see. Something shifted in the air between them, a tension that had nothing to do with diplomatic protocols or mission parameters. For a moment, Rex allowed himself to truly see the woman before him, separate from rank or species or assignment. This mission is dangerous, he said finally. Vaughn is not to be underestimated. I know. If we do this, we do it by the book. Proper protocols, regular check-ins with both our commands, and clear extraction plans. A smile spread across her face. Not the diplomatic mask she had worn earlier, but something genuine and bright that transformed her features. Does that mean you'll help me? Rex nodded, already calculating the risks and contingencies. We'll need to establish our cover immediately. How soon can you arrange an introduction to your ALF contacts? There's a gathering tomorrow night. Ostensibly a cultural event, but many key ALF sympathizers will be present. She hesitated, then added, we should be seen together publicly before then, to establish the relationship narrative. Dinner tonight? Rex suggested. Somewhere visible. We can brief each other on operational details while appearing. Personally engaged. The flush returned to Ionra's cheeks, but she nodded with professional composure. 1900 hours at the Celestial Garden? It's a prominent restaurant in the diplomatic quarter. I'll pick you up at your residence, Rex replied, already mentally reviewing his wardrobe options for civilian attire appropriate to the cover story. As they walked back toward the main compound, Ionra's hand brushed against his, perhaps accidentally, perhaps not. Either way, Rex found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him in a way that went beyond professional consideration. Rex, she said softly as they reached the entrance. Thank you for trusting me. He met her gaze one last time before they resumed their public personas. Let's just make sure that trust is justified, he replied, though without the harshness the words might have carried. We've got a dangerous game ahead of us. I know, she answered, her voice carrying a certainty that somehow reassured him. But I've been preparing for this moment for 5 years. As she walked away, Rex found himself wondering which moment she meant, confronting Vaughn or reuniting with him. Perhaps both. And despite years of training and emotional detachment, he realized he was keenly interested in the answer. The Celestial Garden lived up to its name, with bioluminescent axionite plants creating a canopy of soft light above diners. Rex had arrived precisely on time, dressed in civilian clothes that suggested status without military affiliation, part of their carefully constructed cover story. When Ionra entered, conversations around them dimmed noticeably. She wore a gown that blended human and Axionite fashion, fitted at the top in Earth style, but flowing into the asymmetrical patterns favored by her people. Her orange hair was partially down, floating slightly in the characteristic way of her species. The overall effect was striking enough that Rex's momentary silence wasn't entirely feigned. "You look," he began as she reached their table. "Convincing," she suggested with a hint of humor in her eyes. "I was going to say beautiful," he admitted, rising to pull out her chair. "But convincing works too." The flush that colored her cheeks suggested the compliment had landed as intended. Around them, other diners, both human and Axionite, observed with poorly disguised interest. The planetary ambassador, dining intimately with a high-ranking human officer, was exactly the kind of gossip they needed to circulate. "We're being watched," he noted quietly after they had ordered. "Third table to your left," Ionra confirmed without looking. "Tavern next. He's high in the ALF leadership structure and a personal contact. This is exactly the exposure we wanted." Rex allowed his hand to rest on the table near hers, close but not touching. An implied intimacy. "Tell me about these ALF contacts. What are we walking into?" Over the next hour, between courses of remarkably good food that blended cuisine from both worlds, Ionra briefed him on the key players in the Axionite Liberation Front. She was thorough and analytical, her intelligence assessment demonstrating a level of training that impressed even Rex's experienced judgment. "You've done remarkable work," he acknowledged. "Most GSF operatives take years to develop this kind of network." "I had advantages," she replied. "My family has connections to the traditional power structures, which gave me access, and my apparent youth made people underestimate me, much as you did initially." Rex smiled slightly at the gentle rebuke. "A mistake I'm unlikely to repeat." Their conversation shifted to tactical approaches, contingency plans, and communication protocols, all discussed in coded language that would sound like personal conversation to any eavesdroppers. As the evening progressed, their performance of growing intimacy became increasingly natural. Rex found himself genuinely enjoying her company, impressed by her strategic mind and unexpected flashes of humor. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," he said as they lingered over dessert. "Your diplomatic rise happened very quickly. Even with GSF backing, it's extraordinary for someone your age." Ionra's expression grew more serious. "The previous ambassador was my mentor. He was assassinated 2 years ago. Made it look like an accident, but I found evidence suggesting draconian involvement. That's what originally put me on Vaughn's trail." "I'm sorry," Rex said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "Losing a mentor is difficult." "He believed in peaceful coexistence between our peoples," she continued. "I've tried to honor that legacy while simultaneously hunting his killers. It's been a complex path to walk." Almost without thinking, Rex reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was meant to be comforting, but the contact sent an unexpected current between them. Ionra's skin was slightly cooler than a human's, with a subtle texture that reminded him they were different species. Yet the connection felt strangely right. "We'll find Vaughn," he promised quietly, "and we'll stop whatever he's planning." She turned her hand beneath his, their fingers intertwining in a move that could no longer be dismissed as merely maintaining cover. "I believe you would help me," she said softly, "even before I knew about your history with Vaughn. Something in the way you spoke to me years ago. I knew you were someone who would do the right thing, regardless of politics or species." The naked admiration in her eyes made Rex uncomfortably aware of the deception at the heart of their mission. They were playing roles, creating an impression of romantic involvement for tactical advantage. Yet the warmth spreading through his chest felt genuine in a way he hadn't experienced in years of military service. "We should probably leave," he said, reluctantly withdrawing his hand. "We've given the gossips plenty to discuss, and tomorrow will be challenging." Outside the restaurant, the twin moons of Axion cast a silvery light across the diplomatic quarter. Rex walked Ionra back toward her residence, maintaining the intimate proximity their cover story demanded. The cool night air carried the strange, sweet scent of alien flora, mingling with the subtle, jasmine-like fragrance he had come to associate with her. My security detail is waiting ahead, Ionra said as they approached a curved building of typical Axionite design. This is where we should part. Rex nodded, but neither of them moved immediately. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. For the benefit of our observers, Ionra said quietly, stepping closer, we should make this farewell appear convincing. Before Rex could respond, she had risen on her toes and pressed her lips gently against his. The kiss was light, almost tentative, clearly intended to be brief. Yet as her hand rested against his chest, something shifted in the carefully constructed performance they had maintained all evening. Rex found himself responding, one hand moving to the small of her back to draw her closer. The kiss deepened, transcending the tactical justification that had initiated it. When they finally separated, both seemed equally surprised by what had transpired. That was... Ionra began. Convincing. Rex finished for her, his voice rougher than intended. A smile tugged at her lips. Very. She stepped back, composure returning to her features though her eyes remained bright. 1900 hours tomorrow. I'll send a transport to bring you to the cultural event. I'll be ready, he promised. As he watched her walk away, flanked by her security detail who had diplomatically kept their distance during the exchange, Rex found himself questioning the wisdom of their approach. Pretending to have feelings for Ionra Raylan was proving dangerously easy, perhaps because the pretense was already blurring with reality. The complication was unprofessional and potentially compromising to the mission. Yet as he turned to walk back to his quarters, Rex couldn't bring himself to regret it. Not yet, anyway. The cultural event was held in a vast hall that seamlessly blended native Axionite architecture with human engineering, a physical manifestation of the cooperation Ionra had helped foster. Hundreds of guests from both species mingled beneath floating light sculptures that shifted in hypnotic patterns. Rex, dressed in formal attire that carefully avoided military associations, felt the weight of countless eyes tracking his movements as he entered with Ionra on his arm. Half the room is security or intelligence, he murmured, his lips close to her ear in what would appear to be an intimate gesture. More than half, she confirmed. Yours, mine, and several who answer to neither of our governments. The man by the west entrance is Alf Naren, one of their elders and my primary contact. Rex followed her subtle nod toward an older Axionite male whose traditional robes carried symbols Rex recognized as indicating high cultural status. Despite his advanced age, the man's posture was rigid with barely concealed hostility. He doesn't seem pleased to see us together, Rex observed. He represents the traditional faction, Ionra explained. They tolerate cooperation with humans as a necessary compromise, but view deeper connections as problematic. Our apparent relationship challenges his worldview. Should we approach him now? Not yet. Let's circulate first, establish our presence. He'll come to us when he's ready. Over the next hour, they moved through the gathering with practiced diplomatic ease. Ionra introduced Rex to various officials and cultural leaders, always with a touch or gesture that reinforced their supposed intimacy. For his part, Rex played the role of the captivated human officer, his attention never straying far from her, even when engaged in conversation with others. It wasn't entirely an act. Ionra, in her element, was genuinely fascinating to watch, switching effortlessly between languages, navigating complex political undercurrents, and subtly advancing their agenda with each carefully chosen word. Eventually, as she had predicted, Naren approached them during a momentary lull in their social obligations. Ambassador Raylan. He greeted Ionra with a formal bow that deliberately excluded Rex. You honor us with your presence. Elder Naren. She replied with equal formality. May I present Major Rex Thorne of Earth Command? He's serving as our new security liaison. We've heard much about the Major, Naren said, finally acknowledging Rex with a curt nod. His reputation precedes him. All good things, I hope, Rex replied with a diplomatic smile. That would depend on one's perspective, wouldn't it? The elder's gaze shifted between them, noting their proximity with obvious disapproval. Some might question where your true loyalties lie, Major. My loyalty is to peace, Rex answered smoothly. Something the ambassador and I have in common. Peace through submission to Earth's expansionist agenda. Naren challenged. Ionra intervened before Rex could respond. Elder Naren, Major Thorn has been quite vocal within Earth Command about respecting Axionite sovereignty. In fact, his views have sometimes put him at odds with his superiors. This was part of their constructed narrative. Rex, as the sympathetic human who questioned his own government's policies. Still, he was impressed by how Ionra wove truth into their deception. He had indeed often advocated for more respectful approaches to indigenous cultures in colonized worlds. Is that so? Naren seemed skeptical but intrigued. Perhaps the Major would care to elaborate on these views in a more private setting. I'd welcome the opportunity, Rex replied, recognizing the opening they had been waiting for. There is a gathering tomorrow evening, Naren said after a moment's consideration. More intimate than this official function. Discussions of cultural importance to our people. Would you join us, Major? Both of you. The inclusion of Ionra seemed reluctant but necessary. We would be honored. Ionra answered before Rex could speak. Send the details to my private channel. Naren nodded, his eyes lingering on Rex with calculating assessment. Until tomorrow, then, I trust you'll find the conversation enlightening. As the elder moved away, Rex felt Ionra's hand tighten slightly on his arm. That's our inn, she whispered. The gathering is an ALF leadership meeting disguised as a cultural event. He's testing me, Rex observed, gauging whether I'm truly sympathetic or just another military spy. Which is why our cover needs to be impeccable. They continued their circuit of the room, but Rex noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Word of their invitation had apparently spread quickly among those in the know. They were being watched with increased intensity, some with curiosity, others with clear suspicion. We're committed now, he said quietly. No turning back. Ionra's expression remained professionally pleasant, but he felt the tension in her body. Are you having doubts? About the mission? No. About the wisdom of putting you in Vaughn's crosshairs? Absolutely. Her eyes met his, surprise evident in them. You're worried about me? You're the linchpin of stability on this planet, he replied, keeping his voice low. And my partner in this operation. Of course I'm concerned. I've been trained for this, Rex, she reminded him, though her expression softened at his concern. GSF Special Intelligence requires extensive combat and survival certification. Training and experience are different things, he countered. Vaughn is ruthless. I've seen what he's capable of. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of a human dignitary, a representative from Earth's diplomatic corps, whom Rex recognized but had never met personally. After introductions and pleasantries, the conversation turned to the growing relationship between their species. Throughout the exchange, Rex noted the diplomat's careful observation of his interactions with Ionra. You make a striking couple, the diplomat commented eventually, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Though I confess, Ambassador, many of us were surprised to learn of your personal connection with Major Thorn. The heart has its own diplomacy, Ionra replied with a graceful smile. One that sometimes proves more effective than official channels. Indeed. Well, I wish you both happiness. His gaze shifted to Rex, though I imagine certain elements in Earth Command might view such a relationship with concern. The veiled warning was clear enough. Rex was being monitored by his own government, his apparent relationship with Ionra already raising flags. It was exactly the impression they wanted to create, Rex as potentially compromised by his alien lover, but the reality of the scrutiny was nonetheless unsettling. Later, as the event began to wind down, Rex and Ionra found a relatively private moment on one of the hall's observation balconies. The city spread below them, a beautiful integration of two civilizations that belied the tensions simmering beneath the surface. We're being watched from multiple angles, Rex noted, maintaining a casual posture while conducting a subtle scan of their surroundings. Your security detail at the doorway, what appears to be Earth intelligence by the refreshment station, And if I'm not mistaken, our friend Naren has someone monitoring us from the opposite balcony. Ionra stepped closer, resting her hand on his chest in a gesture that would appear intimate to observers. Then we should give them something to watch, she suggested, her voice professional despite the implications of her words. Rex understood the tactical necessity, yet found himself hesitating. Their earlier kiss had crossed a line between performance and genuine emotion, at least for him. Repeating the experience as a calculated move felt somehow dishonest. Ionra sensed his reluctance. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he replied automatically, then reconsidered. "Actually, that's not true. This deception, it's becoming complicated." Understanding dawned in her eyes. The line between pretense and reality. He nodded slightly, appreciating her perceptiveness. "It's unprofessional of me to mention it. The mission takes priority." "Rex," she said softly, reaching up to touch his face with a gentleness that seemed to transcend their tactical situation. "Not everything between us is pretense. I think we both know that." The admission hung in the air between them, neither fully acknowledged nor denied. In that moment of shared honesty, the performance they had been maintaining all evening fell away, leaving something more genuine in its place. When she rose to kiss him this time, there was no hesitation on either side. Their embrace was no longer for the benefit of watchful eyes, but an expression of something neither had fully recognized until now. Reality had caught up to their cover story, blurring the boundaries between duty and desire. They separated only when a discreet cough signaled the approach of Ionra's chief of security. The interruption brought them back to the present moment, to the mission and the dangers that lay ahead. "Tomorrow evening," Rex said as they prepared to leave the event. "Naren's gathering. That's where we'll get our first real lead on Vaughn." Ionra nodded, her professional demeanor returning though her eyes still held the warmth of their shared moment. "Be careful until then. If our cover has been noted by Earth intelligence, Vaughn may already be aware of our connection. All the more reason to make it convincing," Rex replied with a hint of a smile. "Get some rest, Ambassador. Tomorrow we step into the lion's den." As they parted ways, each surrounded by their respective security details, Rex found himself reviewing the day's events with mixed emotions. The mission was proceeding according to plan. Their cover was established. Initial contact with the ALF leadership had been made. Yet the most significant development had nothing to do with operational objectives. Somewhere between pretense and reality, he had begun to care for Ionra Raylan in a way that went far beyond professional partnership. It was a complication he hadn't anticipated, and one that could prove either their greatest strength or their most dangerous vulnerability in the days ahead. The location of Naren's cultural gathering surprised Rex. Rather than the clandestine meeting he had expected, they were escorted to what appeared to be an ancient temple complex on the outskirts of the capital city. The structures were clearly Axionite in origin, predating human arrival by centuries. "This is the Temple of Ancestral Wisdom," Ionra explained as their transport descended toward a landing pad integrated discreetly into the natural landscape. "It's considered sacred ground, neutral territory where traditional laws of hospitality apply. Even during the worst tensions between our peoples, this place remained inviolate." "Strategic choice," Rex noted. "Earth military protocols restrict operations near recognized cultural heritage sites. If anything happens here, it can't be easily blamed on human interference." Ionra nodded. "It also means we'll be scanned for weapons and communication devices upon entry." "Are you prepared for that?" "My implanted emergency beacon is undetectable to their technology," Rex confirmed. "Otherwise, I'm clean." "You?" "The same. If we need a signal for extraction, we'll have to reach the outer perimeter. The temple walls block all transmissions." As they disembarked from the transport, Rex was struck by the stark beauty of the temple complex. Unlike the integrated architecture of the capital, this was purely Axionite, organic curves and angles that seemed to grow from the very landscape, illuminated by the same bioluminescent technology he had seen throughout their civilization. Naren awaited them at the entrance, flanked by two younger Axionites whose ceremonial robes did little to disguise their watchful postures. Security, not religious attendance. Ambassador, Major. The elder greeted them with formal bows. You honor us with your presence at this sacred site. The honor is ours, Elder, Ionra replied with equal formality. We come with respect and open minds. The scanning process was thorough, but conducted with ceremonial dignity that masked its security purpose. Once cleared, they were led through a series of corridors and chambers, each more elaborate than the last. Rex noted escape routes and defensive positions automatically, the soldier in him never fully at rest. Finally, they entered a vast circular chamber where perhaps 30 Axionites were already gathered. The conversation dimmed as they entered, all eyes turning to assess the human in their midst. Rex recognized several faces from intelligence briefings, high-ranking ALF members whose political views range from moderate dissent to radical separatism. Our distinguished guests, Naren announced to the assembly. Ambassador Ionra Raelin and Major Rex Thorne of Earth Command. The reaction was mixed, some offering polite acknowledgement, others making no effort to hide their suspicion or outright hostility. Rex maintained a neutral expression, though his senses were on high alert. Major Thorne has expressed interest in understanding the traditional Axionite perspective, Naren continued. In the spirit of enlightenment, we have agreed to share our truths with him, and with our esteemed ambassador, who perhaps has spent too long in human company. The barb was barely veiled, but Ionra received it with diplomatic grace. All perspectives have value, Elder. I am always eager to learn. The gathering settled into what appeared to be a traditional council format, with attendees seated in concentric circles around a central space where speakers would present their views. Rex and Ionra were placed prominently in the inner circle, a position of honor that also allowed everyone to observe them closely. For the next hour, Rex listened as various elders and ALF leaders spoke about Axionite grievances, the encroachment of human settlements on traditional lands, cultural erosion, resource exploitation, and political marginalization. Many of the concerns were legitimate, and Rex found himself genuinely sympathetic to their position. You've been unusually quiet, Major, Naren observed eventually. Do our concerns seem trivial from your military perspective? All eyes turned to Rex, the challenge unmistakable. This was the test they had anticipated, the moment to establish his credentials as a potential sympathizer. Not trivial, Rex replied carefully. Familiar. Throughout human history, we've repeated the same patterns of colonization. We arrive, we expand, we displace. The justifications change, but the outcome rarely does. He paused, letting his words sink in. I've seen the aftermath on 3 different worlds. It's why I requested reassignment to diplomatic security rather than frontline command. A murmur ran through the gathering, surprise mixed with reassessment. Beside him, Ionra maintained her diplomatic composure, though he felt her subtle approval. Pretty words called a voice from the outer circle. A younger Axionite male rose, his traditional robes modified with symbols Rex didn't recognize. But words change nothing. What has your presence here ever brought us but suffering? Tarvex, Naren cautioned, the Major is our guest. He is an occupier, Tarvex countered, advancing toward the center circle. Like all his kind, they speak of peace while their weapons remain pointed at our hearts. Rex met the young Axionites glare steadily. You're right that words alone change nothing. Actions matter more, which is why my security recommendations have consistently advocated reducing military presence in civilian areas and transferring territorial control back to Axionite authorities. This was true, another piece of their cover story that happened to align with Rex's actual record. The best deceptions, he knew, were built on foundations of truth. If you believe that Tarvex challenged, then why serve Earth Command at all? Why enforce policies you claim to oppose? Because change from within requires position and influence, Rex replied. And because not all humans share the colonial mindset. Many of us believe in genuine partnership between species. Partnership? Tarvex laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when you take our ambassador to your bed? Another form of conquest. A tense silence fell over the gathering. The accusation was crude but effective, directly attacking the relationship that formed the cornerstone of their cover story. Rex felt Ionra stiffen beside him, though her expression remained carefully controlled. Before Rex could respond, another voice spoke from the entrance to the chamber, one that sent a chill of recognition down his spine. Perhaps the Major could elaborate on his vision of partnership between our peoples, suggested the newcomer, stepping into the light. I find myself curious. Rex knew that voice, though he had never expected to hear it in this setting. Tall for a draconian, with the characteristic scaled skin and amber eyes of his species, Drex Vaughn had changed little in the years since Centauri Prime. He wore traditional Axionite robes, modified to accommodate his alien physiology, a visual claim to alliance that Rex found deeply ironic given his history. Commander Valex. Naren greeted the Draconian with respect. We are honored by your presence. Valex, an alias, though apparently a successful one. Rex kept his expression neutral through sheer force of will, though his pulse had accelerated at the sight of his old adversary. Beside him, Ionra's hand found his, a gesture that could be interpreted as affection but serve as a warning to maintain their cover. The honor is mine, Vaughn replied smoothly, his gaze fixed on Rex. Especially with such distinguished guests. Major Thorne's reputation is known even beyond Earth's territories. Commander, Rex acknowledged with a curt nod, maintaining the pretense that they were strangers. I wasn't aware the Draconian Consortium had taken an interest in Axionite affairs. My government recognizes the right of all species to self-determination, Vaughn replied. Unlike Earth Command, we offer assistance without colonization. The irony was sickening. Vaughn, whose actions had resulted in the deaths of thousands of civilians, positioning himself as a champion of indigenous rights. Yet the assembled Axionites seemed to accept his presence without question, suggesting his infiltration was both deep and long-standing. Commander Valex has been a valuable ally, Naren explained, providing tactical expertise and resources for our cultural preservation efforts. Cultural preservation, a transparent euphemism for ALF operations. Rex nodded, as though accepting this at face value, while internally recalculating every aspect of their mission. Vaughn's direct involvement changed everything, escalating both the danger and the stakes. Perhaps we could speak privately, Major, Vaughn suggested with predatory politeness. Soldier to soldier. I'm curious about your unconventional views on interspecies relations. The double meaning was clear, a reference to both Rex's political positions and his apparent relationship with Ionra. It was also potentially a trap, separating them for individual interrogation. Another time, perhaps, Rex replied evenly. The ambassador and I have an appointment with the colonial governor this evening. We should be leaving soon. Of course, Vaughn's smile didn't reach his eyes. Duty calls, but I do hope we'll have the opportunity for a more in-depth discussion before you leave our world. The possessive reference to Axion as our world was not lost on Rex, nor was the veiled threat beneath the cordial words. The encounter had confirmed their worst suspicions. Vaughn was deeply embedded with the ALF, likely manipulating them toward violent conflict that would serve Draconian interests. As they prepared to depart, Rex noticed Vaughn in quiet conversation with Tarvex, the young radical who had confronted him earlier. The Draconian's hand rested on the Axionite's shoulder in what appeared to be a mentoring gesture, but Rex recognized the subtle techniques of manipulation at work. Outside the temple, as they waited for their transport, Ionra finally spoke. That was him, Vaughn. Rex nodded grimly, operating under the alias Commander Valex. Supposedly a Draconian advisor to the ALF, but I bet my commission he's orchestrating their more radical actions. He recognized you, she observed, yet he maintained the pretense. A game we're both playing, Rex replied, but his presence confirms our intelligence was correct. This is bigger than local unrest. The Draconians are pushing for a proxy war. Their transport arrived, and they maintained silence until they were safely inside with privacy screens activated. Only then did Rex allow his carefully controlled expression to shift, revealing the cold fury beneath. He's using them, he said quietly. just like on Centauri, manipulating legitimate grievances to provoke violent conflict that served draconian strategic interests. Ionra studied him with concern. This is personal for you. He orchestrated the massacre of a peaceful colony, Rex replied. 3,000 civilians, including 800 children. And he walked away without consequences. So yes, it's personal. Her hand found his again, this time without observers to perform for. We'll stop him, Rex. But we need to be strategic. If he suspects our true purpose. He already does, Rex interrupted. That invitation to talk privately was an assessment. He's trying to determine how much I know and what our real agenda is. Then we accelerate our timeline, Ionra decided. I have contacts inside the ALF who aren't at Naren's level. Lower ranking, but with access to operational details. We need to find out what Vaughn is planning specifically. Rex nodded, his tactical mind already analyzing options. We need hard evidence of draconian manipulation, something concrete we can take to both your leadership and mine. Without it, any military action risks being seen as Earth aggression against legitimate Axionite resistance. My contact, Laurel, works in communications at the main ALF compound. If anyone knows about upcoming operations, she will. Ionra hesitated, then added, but reaching her will be difficult. The compound is heavily secure, and after today's meeting, will be watched more closely than ever. Rex considered this challenge. We need a reason to be near the compound without raising suspicion. Something that fits our cover story but gives us access. Ionra's expression shifted as an idea formed. The lunar convergence ceremony is 3 days from now. It's held in the mountains near the ALF compound. Many of their members participate in the traditional rituals. As ambassador, I would naturally attend, and bringing my human partner would be seen as culturally significant. A public appearance that puts us in proximity to the compound without raising red flags. Rex nodded approval. It could work, but 3 days gives Vaughn time to advance whatever he's planning. We have no choice, Ionra replied. Rushing in without proper intelligence would be suicide and would risk exposing everything we've worked for. She was right, Rex knew, though the delay chafed against his instinct to act immediately. Vaughn's presence changed the calculus significantly. Whatever the Draconian was planning, it was likely more dangerous than they had initially suspected. As their transport approached the diplomatic quarter, Ionra moved closer, speaking softly despite the privacy screens. We'll need to be even more convincing now. Vaughn will be watching us closely, looking for any inconsistency in our cover. I know, Rex agreed, his eyes meeting hers. The implications hung unspoken between them. Their pretense of intimacy would need to withstand even greater scrutiny. Rex, she said after a moment's hesitation, about what's happening between us. The lines that are blurring. He stopped her with a gentle touch. We focus on the mission first. Everything else, we figure out after Vaughn is neutralized. She nodded, professional composure returning to her features, though her eyes held questions that remained unanswered. As the transport settled onto the landing pad of the diplomatic compound, they prepared to resume their public roles. The human officer and the Axionite ambassador, united by more than just duty, but constrained by the dangerous game they played. What neither of them realized was that the game had already changed, and that Vaughn was several moves ahead of them. The following day brought new complications. News of Rex and Ionra's appearance at Naren's gathering had spread through both human and Axionite communities, generating exactly the kind of attention their cover story required, but also increasing the pressure on them to maintain the deception flawlessly. Earth Command has requested a private briefing. Rex informed Ionra when they met in her secured office at the diplomatic compound. General Harris wants a full report on my cultural outreach to the ALF. Do you think they suspect? Not our mission, Rex replied, but my apparent sympathies concern them. It's part of our cover. The compromised officer whose alien lover may be influencing his loyalties, but it's generating real scrutiny. Ionra nodded, understanding the delicate balance they needed to maintain. How will you handle it? By telling selective truths. The ALF has legitimate grievances. Naren is a traditional elder concerned about cultural preservation. These facts support our cover while revealing nothing about our investigation into Vaughn. They spent the morning reviewing what little intelligence they had on Vaughn's activities since his appearance as Commander Valex. GSF records confirmed he had arrived on Axion approximately 18 months earlier, establishing himself as a draconian military advisor sympathetic to Axionite independence. His timing coincides with the assassination of my mentor, Ionra noted grimly, and the subsequent escalation of Alpha activities from protest to sabotage. Classic Vaughn strategy, Rex agreed. Eliminate moderate voices, empower radicals, push toward violence that serves draconian interests. But what exactly is their endgame? Axion isn't strategically positioned for traditional military objectives. Rex considered this question. Resources, perhaps. Axion has significant deposits of rare elements needed for quantum communications technology. Possibly, Ionra acknowledged. But the extraction infrastructure is minimal. It would take years to develop meaningful production capability. They were still discussing possibilities when Ionra's security chief interrupted with urgent news. Tarvex, the young radical from Naren's gathering, had been arrested by human security forces after an explosive device was discovered in his possession near the Colonial Administrative Center. This changes everything, Ionra said after the security chief departed. If the device had detonated. Exactly what Vaughn wants, Rex concluded. Escalation. An Axionite attack on a human government building would trigger military response protocols. The fragile peace would collapse. We need to see Tarvex, Ionra decided. As ambassador, I can request access on diplomatic grounds. Rex nodded. And as your security escort, I would naturally accompany you. But we need to move quickly before Vaughn can implement whatever contingency plan he has in place. Within 2 hours, they were at the Colonial Security Detention Center where Tarvex was being held. Ionra's diplomatic credentials secured them immediate access, though Rex noted the increased security presence and tension among the human personnel. News of the attempted bombing had clearly spread throughout the security apparatus. Tarvex sat sullenly in the interrogation room, his youthful features hardened by hatred as they entered. His wrists were bound by energy restraints, standard procedure for terrorism suspects, but a visual affront that would inflame Alf sentiment if images were released. Ambassador, he greeted Ionra with contempt. Come to ensure your human masters treat me properly? I've come to understand what happened, Ionra replied calmly, and to ensure your rights under the colonial accords are respected. Tarvex's gaze shifted to Rex, his expression darkening further. And you brought your pet soldier. How touching. Rex remained impassive, allowing Ionra to lead the conversation. This was her terrain, building rapport, gathering intelligence through dialogue. His role was to observe and analyze, particularly the inconsistencies that might reveal Vaughn's influence. The explosive device, Ionra said directly. Where did you get it? I made it, Tarvex replied with defiant pride. From components any Axionite child could assemble. A lie? Rex noted immediately. The preliminary report had indicated the device was military grade, with components not available to civilians. Vaughn's signature was all over this operation, using a young radical as a disposable asset. Tarvex, Ionra's voice softened. I know you believe you're fighting for our people, but consider who benefits from violence. Not the Axionites living in integrated communities. Not the traditionalists who seek cultural preservation. Pretty words from a collaborator, Tarvex spat. While you dine with humans and warm their beds, our people suffer, and bombing a government building would improve their situation. Rex interjected, his tone deliberately provocative. Or would it trigger a military crackdown that punishes innocent Axionites? Tarvex's eyes narrowed. Better conflict than slow extinction. At least in war, we die with dignity. Those aren't your words, Ionra observed quietly. They're Valex's, aren't they? The draconian advisor. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Tarvex's features before his defiance returned. Commander Valex understands what it means to fight for freedom. Unlike you. Does he? Rex asked. Or does he understand how to manipulate idealistic young warriors into becoming expendable weapons? Tarvex lunged forward despite his restraints, raw hatred in his eyes. You know nothing about him. He's dedicated his life to helping oppressed species throw off their colonizers. Is that what he told you? Rex leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Did he mention Centauri Prime, the New Haven colony? Did he tell you how he helped them achieve freedom by orchestrating the slaughter of thousands of civilians? Confusion crossed Tarvex's face, quickly masked by stubborn loyalty. Lies. Human propaganda. Tarvex, Ionra intervened, her tone gentle but urgent. Whatever Vallex has planned, you won't live to see it. You're a pawn, arrested with evidence that links the ALF directly to terrorism. With the colonial accord suspended, Earth Command would have justification for military action against all ALF facilities. The young Axionites' eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his ideological armor. The Elders would never permit. The Elders aren't controlling this, Rex interrupted. Vallex is, and he doesn't care how many Axionites die as long as it served Draconian interests. Tarvex fell silent, internal conflict visible in his expression. Finally, he spoke again, his voice lower and less certain. The device wasn't supposed to detonate. It was just a demonstration, a warning. But with enough explosive power to collapse half the building if it had activated, Rex noted. That's not a warning. That's a massacre. No, Tarvex shook his head. There's a timer. It wouldn't have detonated until after hours, when the building was empty. Rex and Ionra exchanged a glance, both recognizing the significance of this information. Tarvex believed he was placing a symbolic device that would cause property damage but no casualties. If that had been Vaughn's actual plan, the device would have been set differently. Tarvex, Ionra said carefully. The device you were carrying had no timer. If triggered, it would have detonated immediately, during peak hours, with maximum civilian casualties. The blood drained from the young Axionites' face. That's not possible, Commander Vallex assured me. He lied, Rex stated flatly. He gave you a different device than the one you thought you were carrying. You weren't a messenger. You were a suicide bomber. One who would never live to reveal who gave you the explosives. Tarvex's composure finally shattered, the reality of his manipulation crashing down upon him. There's more, he whispered, voice trembling. The demonstration was just the beginning. Vallex has been preparing something bigger. Much bigger. What? Ionra pressed. Tarvex, what is he planning? I don't know details, the young Axionite admitted. Only that it involves something called Project Eclipse. The Elders aren't aware. It's compartmentalized to Vallex's most loyal followers. He hesitated, then added, but whatever it is, it's happening during the lunar convergence. Rex fought to keep his expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in his mind. The lunar convergence, the very event they had planned to use as cover for contacting Ionra's intelligence source, was apparently Vaughn's target as well. Where? Rex demanded. Where is this Project Eclipse based? The old mining facility in the northern mountains, Tarvex replied. It's been converted to an ALF training compound, but the lower levels are restricted. Only Vallex and his inner circle have access. After extracting what little additional information Tarvex possessed, Rex and Ionra left the detention center with a new sense of urgency. In the secure transport, they immediately began reassessing their strategy. The lunar convergence is only 2 days away, Ionra noted. Whatever Vaughn is planning, we have. Minimal time to identify and stop it. We need to infiltrate that mining facility, Rex stated. Based on Tarvex's information, I'd wager that's where we'll find concrete evidence of Draconian involvement, enough to convince both our governments. The facility is heavily guarded, Ionra cautioned. Direct infiltration would be nearly impossible without detection. Rex considered their options. What if we don't try to avoid detection? What if we use our existing cover to walk right through the front door? Explain. You're the ambassador, respected even among the ALF despite suspicions about your human sympathies. I'm your controversial human partner. What if we request a tour of ALF facilities as part of your cultural outreach? Frame it as an opportunity to show a high-ranking human officer the legitimate concerns of your people. Ionra's eyes widened as she grasped the strategy. It's audacious, but it might work, especially if we channel the request through Naren rather than directly to the ALF leadership. Exactly. As a traditional elder, he'd see value in educating the sympathetic human officer. It fits our established narrative. And once inside, Ionra continued, following his logic, we create an opportunity to separate from the tour. With appropriate surveillance countermeasures, we might access the restricted areas. Rex nodded. High risk, but potentially high reward. Most importantly, it gets us in position before the lunar convergence, before Vaughn can execute whatever he's planning. The plan was dangerous, relying heavily on the credibility of their cover and their ability to improvise once inside the facility. Yet, both recognized they had few alternatives given the compressed timeline and the stakes involved. We should inform our respective commands, Ionra suggested. If something goes wrong, extraction support may be necessary. Minimal details, Rex cautioned. The more people who know, the greater the risk of exposure, especially with Vaughn's demonstrated intelligence capabilities. As they solidified their approach, Rex found himself studying Ionra's profile against the transport window. Her expression was focused, determined, the seasoned intelligence operative rather than the diplomatic ambassador. Yet there was vulnerability there too, a recognition of the dangers they were walking into. Ionra, he said quietly, if this goes wrong, it won't. She interrupted firmly. If it does, he persisted, I want you to know that what's developed between us, it's not just for the mission. Not anymore. She turned to face him fully, her iridescent eyes searching his. I know, she replied simply. I've known since that first real kiss on the balcony. A small smile touched her lips. Perhaps even before that. The admission hung between them, a moment of genuine connection amid the tangled web of deception they had woven. Rex reached across the space between them, his hand finding hers in a gesture that had nothing to do with maintaining cover and everything to do with the feelings that had developed against all professional wisdom. When this is over, he promised, we'll figure out what it means. All of it. When Vaughn is stopped, she agreed. Not before. Their fingers intertwined, human and Axionite, as the transport sped toward the diplomatic compound. The mission parameters had changed. The dangers had escalated. But one thing had crystallized with unexpected clarity. What had begun as pretense had become the most real thing either had experienced in years of duty and sacrifice. Ahead lay infiltration, danger, and a confrontation with a deadly enemy. But in that moment, something shifted between them. A silent promise that transcended the mission, a commitment to a future neither had anticipated when their paths recrossed after 5 years apart. The infiltration plan proceeded more smoothly than either had dared hope. Naren, while skeptical of their motives, saw political value in exposing a high-ranking human officer to ALF facilities. The Elders' intervention secured them an invitation to tour the northern compound, officially described as a cultural preservation center, though both knew it housed the ALF's military operations. As their transport approached the facility, nestled in the rugged mountain landscape far from human settlements, Rex reviewed their objectives one final time. Primary goal: locate and document evidence of Project Eclipse, whatever it is, to prove draconian manipulation of the ALF. Secondary goal: identify Vaughn's specific plan for the lunar convergence ceremony, Ionra added. Operational constraints: maintain cover at all costs. If discovered, we pivot to diplomatic immunity rather than revealing GSF involvement. And if Vaughn is present? Ionra asked. Rex's expression hardened. We maintain the pretense, gather intelligence, and extract. Confrontation only if absolutely necessary to prevent immediate threat. He left unspoken his personal desire to bring Vaughn to justice for Centauri Prime. That was secondary to stopping whatever the Draconian had planned, a fact Rex understood despite his emotional investment. The facility itself appeared less militaristic than expected, built into the mountainside with the organic architectural elements characteristic of Axionite design. Only the subtle security measures, motion sensors disguised as decorative elements, energy barriers masked as atmospheric containment, betrayed its true purpose to Rex's trained eye. Their escort was a mid-level ALF operative named Koroth, whose polite demeanor barely concealed his suspicion of Rex. Throughout the initial tour, Rex played his role perfectly. The sympathetic human officer, genuinely interested in Axionite grievances, asking appropriate questions while revealing nothing of his true purpose. Ionra, meanwhile, maintained her diplomatic persona while discreetly mapping the facility's layout, noting security protocols and identifying potential access points to the restricted lower levels Tarvex had mentioned. These preservation archives are impressive, Rex commented as they were shown a vast chamber filled with cultural artifacts. Your people clearly value their heritage. Some things must be protected from outside influence, Koroth replied pointedly. Not everything benefits from integration. The barb was directed at Ionra as much as Rex, a reference to their relationship. She responded with practiced diplomatic grace. Preservation and evolution can coexist, Koroth. One need not come at the expense of the other. A convenient philosophy for those who prefer evolution over preservation, he countered. Before the exchange could grow more tense, they were interrupted by the arrival of another ALF officer, one whose uniform bore insignia indicating higher rank. Ambassador Raelin. The newcomer greeted Ionra with a formal bow. I'm Commander Sci-Fi, Security Chief for this facility. Elder Naren suggested I personally oversee the remainder of your tour. The commander's arrival was unexpected, but potentially useful. Higher rank meant greater access, if they could maintain their cover convincingly. Commander, Ionra acknowledged. Your facility is most impressive. Major Thorn has expressed particular interest in how traditional knowledge is preserved alongside more practical training. Has he? Sapphira's gaze shifted to Rex, assessment in her eyes. Perhaps the Major would appreciate seeing our tactical planning center. We may be traditionalists, but we embrace modern methods where appropriate. The offer was surprising and suspicious. The tactical center would presumably be part of the restricted areas, not typically shown to outsiders. Either their cover was working exceptionally well, or they were being tested. I'd be honored, Rex replied carefully, though I understand if certain operational details must remain confidential. Of course, Sapphira smiled thinly. We all have our secrets, don't we, Major? The comment sent warning signals through Rex's mind, but backing down would only increase suspicion. They followed the commander deeper into the facility, descending through levels that grew progressively more military in character, the cultural pretense gradually falling away. The tactical center itself was impressively equipped, comparable to Earth command installations with holographic mapping systems, communication arrays, and security monitoring. What caught Rex's attention immediately, however, was a three-dimensional projection of what appeared to be the Lunar Convergence ceremonial grounds, complete with detailed overlays suggesting security positions and crowd control measures. You're taking significant precautions for a cultural ceremony, he observed neutrally. These are uncertain times, Sapphira replied. The ceremony attracts thousands, including many humans. Safety is paramount. Of course, Rex agreed, though his instincts told him the preparations went far beyond normal security protocols. As Sapphira elaborated on various aspects of the facility, Rex noticed Ionra subtly scanning the room, her gaze lingering momentarily on a secure door at the far end, one with significantly higher security measures than others they had passed. Commander, Ionra interjected smoothly. The purification ritual before tomorrow's convergence requires specific preparations. Is there a washroom I might use to perform the preliminary blessing? Of course, Ambassador. Sapphira gestured to a junior officer. Escort the ambassador to the ceremonial washroom on this level. The request was brilliantly conceived, creating a legitimate reason for Ionra to separate from the group while maintaining their cover story. Rex would remain to distract Sapphira while Ionra attempted to gather intelligence on the restricted areas. Major Thorn, Sapphira continued once Ionra had departed, you have a reputation as a tactical innovator. I'd be interested in your assessment of our facility's defensive capabilities. Purely as a professional courtesy, of course. The invitation was a trap. Asking a human officer to evaluate ALF military installations would violate multiple regulations. Yet refusing would undermine his cover as the sympathetic, maverick officer. Without commenting on specific capabilities, Rex replied diplomatically, I observe a solid integration of traditional architecture with modern security systems. The mountainous terrain provides natural advantages for defense in-depth approaches. Sapphira seemed satisfied with his careful response, though her eyes remained watchful. And how does it compare to Earth Command facilities in the capital? Another trap, seeking classified information about human military infrastructure. Rex sidestepped smoothly. Each serves its purpose within different constraints. Integration versus segregation of systems creates distinct operational profiles. Their verbal sparring continued for several minutes. Sapphira probing for information, Rex providing non-answers that maintained his cover without revealing anything of value. Throughout the exchange, he remained acutely aware of the time passing, wondering how Ionra was progressing with her covert exploration and growing increasingly concerned about their separation. His concerns intensified when the facility's communication system activated with a brief announcement. Command personnel to primary operations. Priority visitor arriving. Sapphira's expression shifted subtly. Recognition and perhaps alarm. If you'll excuse me, Major, I have duties to attend to. Please wait here. I'll return shortly to continue our discussion. As she departed with several officers, Rex immediately began a careful assessment of his surroundings, identifying surveillance blind spots and potential access routes to the restricted area Ionra had noted. The priority visitor could be anyone, but his instincts suggested Vaughn had arrived, complicating their already dangerous position. Minutes later, his suspicion was confirmed when a secure door at the far end of the tactical center opened to admit Commander Sapphira, accompanied by Commander Valex. The draconian scaled features arranged in an expression of predatory interest as he spotted Rex. Major Thorne, Vaughn greeted him with false cordiality. What an unexpected pleasure. I didn't realize our distinguished ambassador had brought you to visit our humble facility. Every muscle in Rex's body tensed, combat instincts surging despite the necessity of maintaining their cover. This was the man responsible for thousands of deaths at Centauri Prime. The terrorist he had hunted unsuccessfully for years, standing before him with the confident posture of someone untouchable. Commander Valex, Rex acknowledged with forced calmness. The ambassador believed I might benefit from understanding Axionite perspectives directly rather than through official reports. How enlightened, Vaughn replied, circling slowly as if examining a curious specimen. And where's the lovely ambassador now? Attending to ceremonial preparations, Rex answered, hyper-aware of Vaughn's predatory movement. She'll return shortly. Vaughn nodded as though this explained everything. The convergence rituals are quite demanding for those who observe the old ways. Though I confess surprise that the ambassador still adheres to such traditions, given her progressive attitudes toward humans. The threat was veiled but unmistakable, implying knowledge of their relationship while questioning Ionra's loyalty to her people. Rex maintained his composure through sheer force of will. The ambassador's devotion to her people has never been in question, Rex stated evenly. Her willingness to share their traditions with outsiders demonstrates her commitment to mutual understanding. Mutual understanding, Vaughn repeated, his amber eyes gleaming with malice barely disguised as amusement. An admirable goal, though I wonder how deeply that understanding extends between you and the ambassador. Rumors suggest it's quite profound. Rex refused to take the bait, maintaining a neutral expression despite the rage simmering beneath the surface. The nature of diplomatic relationships often seems mysterious to those observing from outside. Vaughn laughed, a sound entirely devoid of warmth. Indeed, though sometimes what appears to be a diplomatic relationship is something else entirely. His gaze hardened suddenly. Something deceptive. Before Rex could respond, the door slid open again to admit Ionra, escorted by the junior officer who had accompanied her earlier. Her expression remained diplomatically composed, though Rex detected the momentary tension in her posture as she registered Vaughn's presence. "Commander Valex." She greeted the Draconian with formal courtesy. "I didn't realize you would be joining our tour." "A fortunate coincidence," Vaughn replied smoothly. "I arrived for a scheduled briefing and discovered your human companion waiting unattended. I thought it poor hospitality to leave him alone." "How considerate," Ionra replied, moving to stand beside Rex in a subtle gesture of unity that would not be lost on their observers. "Major Thorne has been most impressed by the facility." "I'm sure he has." Vaughn's smile never reached his eyes. "Perhaps he'd be even more impressed by our Special Projects Division. I was just about to suggest a more comprehensive tour." The invitation was clearly a trap, testing whether they would show interest in the restricted areas where Project Eclipse was likely housed. Rex exchanged a brief glance with Ionra, an entire conversation passing between them in that momentary connection. "Another time, perhaps," Ionra replied before Rex could speak. "The ceremonial preparations for tomorrow's convergence are quite demanding, and we've already imposed on Commander Sapphira's generosity longer than planned." Vaughn's expression revealed nothing, but Rex sensed his frustration at being denied the opportunity to maneuver them into a compromising position. Of course, the sacred rituals must take precedence. He performed a formal bow that somehow managed to convey mockery rather than respect. "Until tomorrow's convergence, then. I'll look forward to seeing you both there." The implicit threat in his final words was unmistakable. As they departed the facility under Sapphira's watchful escort, Rex and Ionra maintained their diplomatic personas, expressing appropriate gratitude and exchanging formal pleasantries. Only when they were safely in their transport, privacy screens activated and counter-surveillance measures engaged, did they finally speak freely. "He knows," Rex stated flatly, "or at least suspects." "Yes," Ionra agreed, her composure giving way to urgency. "But I found something, Rex. Something that confirms our worst fears." She activated a concealed data device disguised as a ceremonial bracelet, projecting a holographic schematic into the space between them. "This is what Project Eclipse really is." I managed to access a terminal in the restricted section while performing the purification ritual. Rex studied the projection with growing alarm. The schematic detailed a weapon system of a type he'd encountered only in theoretical briefings, a targeted electromagnetic pulse generator, but one modified to affect biological systems rather than just electronic ones. A neural disruptor, he identified grimly. Military grade, modified for mass effect rather than precision targeting. Ionra nodded. Designed to trigger specific neurological responses in the target population. According to the files I accessed, it's calibrated to affect humans exclusively, though with varying intensity based on proximity to the emitter. Effects: at minimum, disorientation and pain. At maximum output, seizures, neural breakdown, death. She met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the horror of what they'd discovered. Rex, the emitter is designed to be deployed at the ceremonial grounds, right in the middle of thousands of attendees, both human and Axionite. The strategic implications crystallized with sickening clarity. Mass human casualties at a sacred Axionite ceremony, with Axionites unaffected. It would appear to be a deliberate attack by the ALF. Earth Command would have no choice but to respond with military force. Ionra continued, following the same logic. The fragile peace would collapse instantly, and the Draconians achieve their objective. Humans and Axionites destroying each other while they wait to claim whatever's left. Rex's voice hardened with fury. Classic Vaughn. Maximum bloodshed for minimum Draconian investment. They spent the remainder of the journey analyzing the intelligence Ionra had gathered and developing a counter-strategy. The lunar convergence ceremony would begin at sunset the following day, giving them less than 24 hours to prevent a massacre that could trigger an interspecies war. "We need to inform our commands," Ionra insisted. "This requires coordinated intervention." "Agreed, but with extreme caution," Rex cautioned. Vaughn has likely infiltrated both our intelligence networks. Any large-scale operation risks alerting him before we can secure the weapon. After careful consideration, they decided on a three-pronged approach. Rex would brief General Harris with minimal operational details, requesting a small, elite extraction team to be positioned nearby, but on standby only. Ionra would similarly inform her GSF handler, ensuring backup without risking compromise. Most critically, they would personally infiltrate the ceremonial grounds ahead of the event to locate and neutralize the weapon before it could be activated. As night fell over the capital city, they finalized their preparations in Ionra's secured diplomatic residence. Maps of the ceremonial grounds were spread across a table, potential weapon placement locations marked and prioritized. The central altar provides the optimal coverage radius, Rex noted, indicating the elevated platform where the primary rituals would be performed. But it's also the most visible position, constantly surrounded by ceremonial participants. The ancient shrines in the outer circle are more isolated, Ionra suggested, but they'd significantly reduce the effective range. Which means multiple emitters, Rex concluded. We need to assume Vaughn has redundancy built into his plan. As the hours passed, their strategic planning gradually gave way to a somber recognition of the dangers ahead. The mission parameters were clear, the tactical approach defined, but the personal stakes had evolved in ways neither had anticipated when they reconnected days earlier. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Ionra set aside the schematics and turned to face Rex directly. If tomorrow goes wrong, it won't, he interrupted, echoing her earlier assertion. A smile touched her lips at the role reversal. If it does, she persisted, I want you to know that I meant what I said 5 years ago. When you told me to come back when I was older, I truly intended to find you again. The GSF recruitment, the diplomatic training, they were paths to becoming someone who could stand as your equal. The admission struck Rex with unexpected force. The realization that their reconnection wasn't merely coincidence or operational necessity, but the culmination of a journey she had begun the day they first met. You've become far more than my equal, he responded, reaching to touch her face with a gentleness that belied his warrior's hands. The young woman I met that day showed promise. The woman before me now. He shook his head slightly, words failing to capture his admiration for all she had become. What followed wasn't part of any cover story or mission parameters. When Ionra moved into his arms, when their lips met in a kiss no observers were present to witness, it was an expression of something authentic amid the layers of deception they had constructed, a truth they had both been reluctant to acknowledge until faced with the possibility of losing it forever. Morning found them still working, having allowed themselves only that brief interlude of honesty before returning to the mission at hand. The final equipment checks were completed, communication protocols established, and contingency plans rehearsed. As the transport carried them toward the ceremonial grounds, Rex studied Ionra's profile against the rising sun, struck by the calm determination in her expression. Having second thoughts? She asked, catching his gaze. About the mission? No. He smiled slightly. About other things. Perhaps a few. She raised an eyebrow in question. I'm wondering what happens after, he clarified. When Vaughn is neutralized and the weapon disabled. When we're no longer playing roles or maintaining cover. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You're concerned the feelings developed under pretense might not survive in reality. The thought had occurred to me, he admitted. Ionra considered this with characteristic thoughtfulness. 5 years ago, I admired an idea of you, the honorable human officer who treated me with respect despite my youth. That admiration was real, but incomplete. She met his gaze directly. What I feel now is for the man I've come to know, complicated, principled, sometimes frustratingly cautious. This drew a smile from him. Whatever happens today, she continued, that knowledge is real. The connection between us is real. The rest, we discover together. The simple honesty of her answer steadied him in a way tactical certainty never could. As the transport approached the perimeter of the ceremonial grounds, they exchanged one final look of understanding before stepping back into their roles. The mission commander and the intelligence operative, focused entirely on the task ahead. The ancient ceremonial grounds spread across a vast natural amphitheater surrounded by towering rock formations. Hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, preparations were already underway. Ceremonial attendants arranging ritual objects, security personnel establishing perimeters, early pilgrims seeking favorable positions for witnessing the sacred events. Ionra's status as ambassador granted them immediate access. Their presence explained by the diplomatic protocol, requiring her participation in the traditional elements of the convergence. Rex, as her security escort, maintained a watchful perimeter around her while systematically scanning for any sign of the neural disruptor or Vaughn's operatives. The weapon schematics indicated significant power requirements, Rex noted quietly as they moved through the increasingly crowded grounds. They'd need dedicated energy sources, likely disguised, but detectable with the right equipment. Ionra nodded slightly, her ceremonial robes concealing the advanced scanning technology integrated into her traditional jewelry. I'm running continuous sweeps. Nothing yet, but coverage is limited by the crowd density. They separated temporarily. Ionra, to participate in the preliminary blessing rituals required of dignitaries. Rex to conduct a more thorough perimeter assessment under the guise of security protocols. The crowd continued to grow as the afternoon advanced, the atmosphere increasingly charged with anticipation as the twin moons began their approach toward convergence. Rex had completed his third circuit of the outer ceremonial area when his comm unit activated with Ionra's voice, tense with urgency. Northern Ritual Shrine, she reported cryptically. Unusual power signatures beneath decorative elements. Consistent with the specifications we discussed. Understood. Maintain position. I'll investigate. The Northern Shrine was one of 7 ancient structures positioned in a wide circle around the central ceremonial space, aligned with astronomical features significant in Axionite tradition. As Rex approached, he noted the increased security presence. ALF members in ceremonial attire that failed to completely disguise their military bearing. Getting close without arousing suspicion would require a diversion. He activated his comm unit again. I need a diplomatic incident. Nothing serious, just enough to redirect attention. Ionra's acknowledgement came in the form of raised voices from the central gathering area, her distinct tones carrying across the grounds as she engaged in what appeared to be a heated cultural discussion with several ceremonial elders. As predicted, security attention shifted toward the disturbance, creating the opening Rex needed. He moved with practiced efficiency, using the decorative elements of the shrine for cover as he deployed a miniaturized scanner. The results confirmed Ionra's assessment. Beneath the ancient stone work, modern technology hummed with deadly purpose. The neural disruptor emitter was disguised as a ceremonial light fixture, its biological targeting components hidden within traditional symbols. Confirmed, he reported quietly. North position houses an emitter. Initiating neutralization protocol. Using technology provided by Ionra's GSF contacts, Rex attached a minute device to the disguised emitter, one programmed to create a cascading failure in the weapons systems without triggering detection protocols. The delicate procedure required steady hands and complete concentration, qualities that became significantly more challenging when a familiar voice spoke from directly behind him. Admiring our ancient craftsmanship, Major Thorne? Rex turned slowly to find Drex Vaughn standing mere feet away, flanked by 2 ALF security officers whose hands rested on concealed weapons. The Draconian's expression was one of predatory satisfaction, a hunter who had finally cornered long-sought prey. Commander Valex, Rex acknowledged, his mind racing through tactical options. The architectural integration of ritual and function is quite remarkable. Indeed, Vaughn agreed, his amber eyes flicking to the barely visible neutralization device Rex had attached. Though some might consider unauthorized modifications to sacred sites sacrilegious. The game of pretense was over, though neither man explicitly acknowledged it. Rex straightened to his full height, positioning himself for maximum defensive advantage should the confrontation turn violent. Interesting devices you've installed, he commented casually. Not traditional Axionite technology, I'd wager. Progress requires innovation, Vaughn replied with equal casualness. Something you'd appreciate, given your innovative approach to intelligence gathering. One of the ALF guards moved to retrieve the neutralization device, but Vaughn raised a hand to stop him. Not yet. I'm curious how thoroughly the Major has compromised our security. His gaze hardened, and how deeply the ambassador is involved in his espionage. The mention of Ionra triggered a surge of protective instinct that Rex carefully concealed. The ambassador fulfills her diplomatic duties with integrity, he stated evenly. Unlike certain advisors who manipulate their hosts toward violence that serves only outside interests, Vaughn's scaled features tightened with barely suppressed anger. Still self-righteous after all these years, Thorn? Your human colonial ambitions destroyed more worlds than the Draconian Consortium ever has. I merely balanced the scales by massacring civilians? Rex's composure cracked slightly, the memory of Centauri Prime fueling his response. By turning Tarvex into an unwitting suicide bomber? By planning to slaughter thousands of innocent humans at a sacred ceremony? That's not balance, Vaughn. That's terrorism disguised as liberation. The use of his real name shattered the final pretense between them. Vaughn's predatory smile vanished, replaced by cold calculation. So Earth Command finally connected the dots. Impressive, though ultimately futile. He gestured to his guards. Secure him. The ceremony begins in 2 hours. Major Thorn will have the honor of witnessing the dawn of Axionite independence from an optimal vantage point. As the guards moved to apprehend him, Rex prepared to resist, calculating whether eliminating Vaughn immediately would be worth the diplomatic incident and potential disruption to their wider mission. Before he could act, however, a familiar voice interrupted the confrontation. I wouldn't recommend that, Commander. Ionra appeared at the entrance to the shrine area, her diplomatic robes flowing around her, but her posture unmistakably alert. Detaining a human officer without cause would violate the very colonial accords you claim to defend. Vaughn's expression shifted to one of amused contempt. Ambassador Raylan, how fortunate you could join us. Your companion was just explaining his unauthorized modifications to sacred Axionite artifacts. As my security escort, Major Thorn was conducting standard threat assessment protocols. Ionra replied smoothly. Given recent extremist activities, Earth Command insisted on enhanced security measures for all diplomats attending the convergence. It was a plausible explanation, expertly delivered. Rex noted with professional admiration how Ionra maintained perfect diplomatic composure despite the tension crackling through the air. Of course, Vaughn conceded with mock politeness. Security is paramount. Though one wonders why such assessments focus specifically on our ceremonial shrines rather than the general grounds. Intelligence indicated potential threats to symbolic targets, Ionra countered. As you're no doubt aware, Commander, ceremonial sites hold particular significance in asymmetric conflicts. The verbal duel continued, each statement layered with double meanings as Ionra maneuvered to extract Rex from immediate danger without revealing their true mission. Rex used the distraction to assess their tactical position, noting escape routes, calculating response times for backup, and critically, confirming that his neutralization device remained attached to the disguised emitter. Eventually, Vaughn appeared to relent. Perhaps I've been overzealous in my protective duties, he acknowledged with transparently false graciousness. The sacred nature of today's ceremony has us all on edge. Understandably, Ionra agreed, matching his tone of superficial diplomacy. If you'll excuse us, I must complete the ambassador's ritual preparations before the convergence begins. Vaughn stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy, though his final words carried unmistakable menace. By all means, today's ceremony promises to be truly transformative for relations between our peoples. I wouldn't want either of you to miss a moment of it. As they moved away from the northern shrine, maintaining the appearance of diplomatic normalcy, Rex murmured under his breath. North emitter neutralized, but there will be others. And Vaughn knows we're onto him. The confrontation works in our favor, Ionra replied quietly. He'll be focused on us, not realizing we've already alerted our respective commands. GSF extraction teams are moving into position, disguised as ceremonial participants. And Earth Command, General Harris has a tactical team on standby, awaiting our signal. They'll move only on confirmed evidence of the weapon's deployment, which we now have. Their discovery of one emitter had altered the operational timeline, but the fundamental mission remained unchanged. Locate and neutralize all remaining neural disruptors before they could be activated during the ceremony's climax. With Vaughn now aware of their presence, however, the already dangerous task had become significantly more complex. As the twin moons of Axion rose higher in the afternoon sky, gradually converging toward the celestial alignment that gave the ceremony its name, Rex and Ionra moved through the gathered crowds with renewed urgency. Their scanner detected 2 additional emitters, one disguised within the Eastern Shrine, another concealed beneath the ceremonial musician's platform. The neutralization of these weapons required increasingly creative distractions and cover stories as Vaughn's security forces intensified their surveillance. By the time the actual ceremony began, with thousands of Axionites and hundreds of human visitors gathered throughout the amphitheater, they had disabled 3 of what they believed were 7 total emitters. Time is running out, Rex noted grimly as ceremonial drums began to echo across the grounds. The convergence reaches its apex in less than an hour. The central altar, Ionra concluded, her voice tight with controlled tension. That's where the primary emitter must be. Maximum coverage radius, optimal elevation for signal propagation. Also the most heavily guarded and publicly visible location, Rex pointed out. We can't approach it without being immediately detected. Ionra's expression shifted as an idea formed. Unless we're supposed to be there. As ambassador, I'm expected to participate in the central blessing ritual at the convergence moment. And I'd naturally accompany you as security, Rex continued, grasping her strategy. But Vaughn will be watching for exactly that approach. Which is why we need to force his hand, Ionra replied. Draw him out, confront him directly. With both GSF and Earth Command witnesses present, we can expose the draconian plot publicly. The plan was dangerous, deliberately provoking a confrontation with a known terrorist in a crowded ceremonial setting. But their options were limited by the advancing timeline and Vaughn's awareness of their mission. As the ceremony progressed through its traditional elements, the crowd's energy intensified. The twin moons visible in the darkening sky drew inexorably closer to perfect alignment, a rare astronomical event that held profound spiritual significance for the Axionite people. Throughout the grounds, Rex observed ALF security personnel moving into position, their ceremonial attire failing to disguise their tactical formations. They're establishing a perimeter around the central altar, he noted, cutting off potential interference with the primary emitter. Ionra nodded slightly, her attention focused on the ceremonial leaders who were now summoning dignitaries for the final convergence ritual. It's time. Remember, we need Vaughn to reveal himself. Public exposure is our best weapon now. As Ionra's name was called, they moved toward the central altar with deliberate pace. Rex maintained his security escort posture while continuously scanning for threats. Vaughn was nowhere visible among the ceremonial participants, though Rex sensed his presence, the predator watching from concealment, waiting for the optimal moment to strike. The central altar was an ancient stone platform elevated above the surrounding grounds, accessible by a single set of ceremonial steps. As they ascended, Rex noted the subtle technological modifications disguised within the traditional carvings, confirmation that their suspicions about the primary emitter were correct. The ceremonial leaders arranged the dignitaries in a circular formation around the altar, positioning Ionra directly opposite from where the disruptor controls appeared to be concealed. Rex remained at the perimeter, maintaining a clear sight line to both Ionra and the suspected weapon location. The crowd below fell into reverent silence as the moons approached perfect alignment, their combined light casting an ethereal glow across the amphitheater. It was in this moment of ceremonial focus that Rex spotted Vaughn finally emerging from the shadows, moving with predatory purpose toward a position that would give him direct access to the weapon controls. Their eyes met briefly across the expanse of the altar platform, mutual recognition and hostility flowing between them. No more pretense. No more covert operations. The final confrontation would happen here, before thousands of witnesses, with the fate of two species hanging in the balance. Rex activated his emergency beacon, the signal that would bring both GSF and Earth Command forces into position, and began moving toward the concealed weapon controls. At the same moment, Ionra stepped out of the ceremonial circle, her voice carrying across the suddenly confused gathering. "This sacred ceremony has been corrupted," she announced, her tone carrying the authority of her ambassadorial position. "Hidden technology has been installed without the knowledge of our elders. Technology designed to harm our human guests and trigger interspecies war." The accusation caused immediate commotion among both the ceremonial leaders and the crowd below. Vaughn abandoned subtlety, lunging toward the weapon controls with a snarl of frustrated rage. Rex intercepted him halfway, their collision sending both men sprawling across the ancient stone platform. "Draconian terrorist," Rex announced loudly as they struggled, ensuring the gathered witnesses heard the accusation clearly. Operating under the alias Commander Valex to manipulate the ALF toward violence that serves draconian interests. Vaughn abandoned diplomacy entirely, his scaled features contorted with hatred as he fought with the lethal efficiency of his species. "You've interfered for the last time, Thorn," he hissed, strength enhanced by draconian physiology, giving him a momentary advantage. Around them, chaos erupted.